Okay, thank you all for joining us today for the next session of the On the Mark Financial Forum and podcast. I am joined today by Rachel Gottlieb, who is managing director with UBS and an author of a great book that we'll be talking a little bit about. But Rachel, thank you so much for joining me. We're going to be talking today about how to teach your kids about money and some different tactics that you can use to help them get a head start once they become young adults. So, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe you could introduce yourself to the group.
Thank you, Mark, for having me. My name is Rachel Gottlieb. I am, as you said, Mark, a managing director at UBS. My team is Gottlieb Rose Wealth Management, so I'm a managing partner of the team. We have a six-person team at UBS. We manage about $1.6 billion in assets, and very passionate about teaching people about financial literacy. So have worked with a lot of multi-generational clients. So we see this as being very important, and we see firsthand the issues that occur if you don't do a good job talking to your kids about money. So very passionate about the subject. Our team works with athletes, entertainers, business owners, founders, and various different individuals. So thank
Sounds
you for
great.
having me.
Well, no one is more qualified to have this conversation because you wrote this amazing book that we'll talk about. Here we go. Zach's Dollar Dilemma. Who's Zach, by the way? Maybe you know someone named Zach.
Yes, well, I have a son named Zach. It just happens to be.
Right.
Um, and by all means, when it comes to your own kids, I think I can be the first to admit I'm anything but an expert. I'm learning how to parent every single day. And I realize even having two kids, I have Zach and Lexi, that even having two kids, it's very different. Innately, I think everyone has, you're either a little bit of a spender or a saver. It's interesting. So it's been a learning experience. Much easier to give advice than actually take it in practice. So I'm
Yes,
learning every day.
I will say a lot of the things we're talking about today are things that are on my should do list, not my done list. So, but this is why we want to bring this to people's attention because none of us have all of it together, so to speak. There's always more that we can do, and the hope is that people who are watching this or listening to the audio podcast will pick up a tidbit or two of something that resonates with them, and hopefully that will help them improve their education for their kids, or maybe some sort of tactic that can put them in a good position once they become young adults to really thrive financially. And those are really the two problems at hand, right? There's really a lack of educational opportunities for kids to learn about personal finance. One of my biggest gripes about the school system is just that there's a lack of practical knowledge when kids come out of school about credit card use. They know what a credit card is, but they don't know how to use it effectively, how to manage it, how problematic they could be if you let them get out of control, and just other personal finance matters. And then also, what can parents do? And I'm a parent of two young kids as well, 13 and 8 at the time of this recording. And we struggle with these conversations with our kids and want to put them in a position to be able to understand money and how it works, and how to spread it around and not be not just spend every penny that you have, which is the biggest challenge with my 13-year-old daughter right now. As soon as she's got money in her account, it magically vanishes the first shopping opportunity she has. So those are the two main things I wanted to talk about today. Let's start with what kind of conversations we can be having with kids, and just in general, why do you think that is so important?
So, first off, I think every moment you have can be a teachable moment. And what I mean by that is even when you have a little kid and you're going to the store to buy maybe another child a birthday present, it's natural for your child to say, "Oh my God, I want that," whatever that is. Especially now that we live in this world of instant gratification, where you don't have to watch a commercial, you just immediately go to the next episode when you're watching a series, etc.
Right.
So,
And
I
then you
think
order it online and it arrives like by 7 a.m. the next morning.
exactly. And then if it doesn't, they're like, well, where is it? Where is it? When's it
Right.
coming? Anyhow, I think finding teachable moments is very important. So it's okay to say no to your child, or it's okay to say, it's not your birthday. Um, we're here to shop for y- Johnny, whoever. Um, so I think those moments is a great opportunity to start to have those conversations. I think going to the grocery store and making conversation about, I mean, the grocery store is a random example, but like, if even if you're looking at two different things and one costs a little bit more than the other, just like kind of doing these little sound bites because they pick up on it. Or if you're at the mall and you know your daughter wants to go to Sephora and buy something. I mean, like, it's okay to say no. It's okay to point out how expensive it is. It's okay to, kind of teach those little fundamental issues where you have the opportunity. So I think just having conversations and explaining it, it's okay to say, we work hard, we earn money. And then obviously as they get older, then they're going out and they're needing money. So I think instead of one of the things I see people do that I kind of encourage, maybe there's a better way, is instead of just, okay, I'm going to the movies, I'm going to the mall, I want to go meet up with so and so. Like, can I have 20 bucks? Can I have 10 bucks? Whatever it is. I think like setting that allowance so that they can budget it makes a lot of sense, because as you said, as they get older, that's what happens. You get a certain paycheck and that's what you have to spend. So as wonderful as it would be if we just had unlimited funds to do whatever we want to do, that's not really realistic, and it doesn't have to be. So I think it's okay. It's like little kids, little problems, and you let them make mistakes. So if they spend all their money because they went um to from my town, the middle schoolers go to this like shopping area, and if you can get ice cream, you can get pizza, I mean, they've already eaten lunch, of course, but like they can get like ice, they still have to get all that stuff, ice cream, pizza, there's this toy store, there's a CVS. So yes, it's easy to go and get in the habit of just spending whatever your money is in that one time, but it's a skill to learn that, maybe, I don't know, do I really want that ice cream, or like, am I going to want to come back and come back tomorrow, or am I going to want to do something this weekend, or like that Starbucks looks really good, but that's how much did that cost? Like, I think that that's a healthy conversation for them to have with themselves, and it's okay if they spend all their money, because now next week they may think twice about it. And
Right.
that's what I think it's good to get them in the habit of, from that simple thing. So then, I mean, the other thing another thing I would say is that if your child earns a bigger sum of money, so like if it's a birthday or a special event, or my son last year had a business that he started, don't ask. But it's okay to sit down and then have a bigger conversation, just like I would have, quite frankly, with a client, saying, okay, we have X amount of money. And this kind of, where I use like the principles on the book, it's like I sat down with my son and I said, how much do we want to spend? How much do we want to save? How much do we want to give? And how much do we want to invest? And like, I'm not going to tell you that you have to do a certain dollar amount. That's really like a conversation that's personal to each person. Some people spend more, some people give more, some people just like to save it, and some people like to invest it. But you have to do something in each category. And I let him decide, and we talked back and forth of how much he wanted to budget for each. And then had the conversation of like, well, what's he going to spend the money on? What's he going to save for? Is what should we invest in? Let's talk about companies, and like what are good causes that are personal and impactful for him that he wants to give to. So like having those conversations is like doing a little mini financial plan with your kid, and it's a lot better than just like putting it in your bank account, or like putting it in the piggy bank and just deciding what you want to do with it when you want to do with something with it. So that's
Right.
something like that we can do for our kids to help them and give them the right tools for success.
Right. And the key of what you were talking about, is I'm thinking about my own personal family dilemmas and issues, is that just triggering them, or helping them question themselves, like, what should I do with this? Just to ask the question alone is good repetition for them to experience. Because if you live in an affluent area or community, sometimes you see examples of people not really valuing money. That's one
Correct.
of the challenges, that we have to fight against, is that
Right.
there are people around our kids that will spend money indiscriminately. There's no limits, there's nothing. and we don't want to shame those families. That's their choice, and good for them
Right.
for being in a position to do that. But I think teaching kids about the value of money, and you were kind of alluding to it in the grocery store example, you see two different things that are more or less the same, but at different prices. Is there a reason why, you might choose the less expensive one, or maybe you don't need that you know,
Right.
extra attachment to this toy that would make it, better for 5 seconds and then you'll forget about it. Those are the types of thoughts that we want our kids to have. And I know you were talking about the spend, share, invest thing, and that's a big concept in the book. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the book, and how old were your kids when you wrote it?
Oh, so I wrote the book in 2015. Um, I was
Yeah,
moving out of the, yeah, there's the book, Zach's
that's
Dollar
it.
Dilemma.
That's it. Rachel
But
Gottlieb.
yes, it was like a sleepless night that I couldn't sleep. And I just, it was kind of like I married my two passions of being a mom and being a financial advisor. And I was just thinking through these characters. So basically it's about a boy named Zach who earns $1 and doesn't know what to do with it. So at the time, 2015, Zach was 4 and Lexi was like 1, I guess. So um, basically, he earns $1, doesn't know what to do with it. So he goes and meets his animal friends. So first he meets Spencer the Spender. And I may not tell them in order, but Spencer the Spender, who says, spend everything. And he thinks, like, oh, that's a great idea. But then he realizes, well, if I spend everything, then I don't have $1 anymore. And so then he goes and meets his next animal friend, who Savannah the Saver, who says, save everything. And he's like, great idea, but then I don't have anything right now so, and then he meets, and it's all rhyming, so it's a lot more clever than how I'm articulating it. But then he goes and he meets Philip the philanthropist, who was like, give everything. He then decides, well, that's great, but then if he gives everything, he doesn't have any money left that he saved, and he doesn't have anything that he bought. So he goes to the next animal, who's Ina the investor, who says to invest everything. Um, and again, same thing, couldn't do the rest. And then he doesn't know what to do, and he talks to his mom, and he realizes he could do it all, which is the moral of the story. So I think that you should be doing it all. And again, the amounts and percentages, there is no magic. It's very, very personal, from adults to children to everybody. But you should at least be thinking through, what it is that you want to have that combination. And
Yeah,
I
for
think then,
sure.
like, you can build into those topics. So like I've done stuff, with kids and seminars and Girl Scout troops, etc. And I like to keep the conversation, like the dialogue is what the most important part is. Like you can get more into like what is investing, and actually like go through different examples, and you can go through, different things about like where to give to. And I think the dialogue that's created from that basic principle is really the value and the magic. And that's where you see like the kids getting engaged. And like I find it interesting because even because I've done it many different ways, but one time I actually broke kids up into twos, and even having that dialogue, which is basically the same as like if you're making decisions with your partner or spouse, it's the same thing where it's like one may want one thing and one may want something else, and you have to kind of
Right.
figure it out. So that's also an interesting thing to kind of learn it and to experience. So um, yeah, I wrote the book because, again, working with a lot of multi-generational families, I see the importance, and it's a different generation, ours, than many generations behind, that they didn't want to talk about money. So I also have seen firsthand people that, have clients and people that have wanted to give everything to their kids, which is wonderful. And the issue with that, and again, like I also want to give everything to my kids, don't get me wrong, but the issue with not attaching education to that is that you don't necessarily set them up for success. And if you're kind of their golden ticket and you don't have that continuing in your demise, then there can be very serious issues. Or even if you leave money to your children and they're not really well equipped to be able to handle it, those are issues as well. So that's why I just think it's a gift. It's one of those things with parenting where we're trying to always kind of create these uh, individuals that are well equipped to for success, and I think this is a very important component of it.
Yeah, for sure. And those conversations are so important. Just having that dialogue is critical. So I'll give you a personal example. So I love to talk about and invest in real estate. It's my thing. It's my financial advisor wants to kill me because she's like, "Oh no, you bought another property. Let's balance things out a little bit." So it's balance is not my strong point. But laying in bed one night with my daughter as she's getting ready for bed, we're just talking, and I'll, for example, just start talking about the real estate because she knows we own houses. She doesn't know the details about what we own or anything, but she's starting to ask questions about it. And so one night we talked about supply and demand. And so now I'll randomly ask her, "Hey, if supply is low and demand is high, or price is higher or lower?" And she'll be able to answer it now.
That's awesome.
But it's just, and I'll, like, when I go to look at properties, I'll try to take my kids with me because I want them to
Good.
just experience what it's like. And then I'll explain to them why we might buy a house. And my wife often says
100%.
to them, because I'm probably the one who doesn't like to spend on things that are not important in my I'm the curmudgeon in my family when it comes to spending money. But my wife will say to my kids, "Dad likes to spend," and she'll ask me in front of them, "Dad, what do you like to spend money on?" And I'll say, "Well, I like to spend money on things that will generate more money,
Right, right,
so that
right.
we have money as a family to do the things that we want to do." And just having those even conversations between parents, which of course was a total setup, right, for that
Right.
answer. But just having those conversations in front of your kids can just, again, it just, like, they learn from repetition. And the more you put those ideas in front of them, I think the more they learn from it and the more they start to think along those lines. And so my daughter, who had her bat mitzvah recently, now has more money than she, has ever had in her life. And she actually came to me and said, "Dad, I don't want to leave that in a savings account. I want to invest it," because one of her friends read a book and their parents said, "I'll give you $1,000 to invest if you read this book about investing." And they were all over it. Right.
Right.
So it's training them to kind of think along these lines. It's so incredibly important. So,
100%.
but what do you do? Like, how can you encourage kids? It sounds like you've done seminars and things like that. Like, some kids are just not really that interested in it,
Hmm.
but it's still an important topic. So how do you handle those situations if you're at a seminar, you're working with a client and they're like, "Oh, my kids don't really care. They're not really interested." Are there different tactics that parents can use? I would imagine a lot of the people watching are parents, that
Right.
why they're attracted to this topic. But what kind of things can you do to get kids engaged and interested in learning about this more?
I've even had adult kids that are our age that are not interested in engaging, that have money, that don't feel like dealing with it. So I hear you on that. I think naturally some people are going to be interested, some people are not. Some people are going to be like more obsessed and fixated. Like nothing's really necessarily good or bad, but I think as an example, read a book and do the investment. Sounds like that's a good idea. Like I'll give you some money or whatever it is, or I'll match what you have if if you've invested, or I'll something. Um, or sometimes what I'll do is for a gift, I'll say, I want to get you, or for a birthday, or maybe my grandparents, somebody wants to get the kids something, but instead they decide they want to do a stock. So then it's like a conversation. What should we buy? Well, like, where are the prices? Let's look at like, it's a good conversation, a good way to teach them. That's why I just think like the more you can do it earlier, the more it just will be a little bit more natural. Um, but yeah, it is a challenge if someone's not interested. They have to want to be interested. Otherwise it's challenging. But I think just weaving conversations is very important. Like I'll even drive over the bridge. Like we drove over the Triborough Bridge, and I said to my daughter, like we were talking about like a municipal bond. I basically use it as an opportunity to explain like, the debt on the bond, and how like if you were explain the bondholder. Same thing with the Starbucks. Like I've said to my son, I mean, not to talk specific, but I've spoken to my son about like, don't, let's talk about how many cups of coffee it would cost to actually buy the stock and own a piece of the business, right? Like then it's like,
Great
which one
point.
do you want? Like, how quick do we drink those? He doesn't drink coffee, but he has the vanilla bean
Sure.
frappuccinos. It's
Yep.
like, and he drinks half of it. Like, but how much do those cost? And like, how much is if we want to actually own a piece of the business, right? To your point about owning
Right.
versus just spending. Um, like I try to like get them thinking that way, and and that's kind of what I do. But in terms of people, if you're doing a seminar and someone's not interested, I don't know. You
Tough.
let me know.
It's
I don't
tough.
know how you engage them. Maybe you hand them a little like a little vanilla bean frappuccino, get their
Right, there
energy
you
up.
go. Use real life examples. Yeah, you bribe them with food. That usually helps.
Exactly.
But I think, what you alluded to earlier about just bringing it into a real life example is one way to do that, where they might roll their eyes if you try to sit them down and have a conversation about it. But when you're in the store, it's like that teaching moment and that opportunity, or you're giving a birthday gift, or like almost like situational experiences that
Right.
you can engage them on. And maybe some kids just absorb little morsels of things better than a big sit down chat about it.
It's true.
So,
Like the little bites, if they
yeah,
need like little information bites. I mean, sometimes you can get them excited by everyone learns differently, right? Like maybe you show them something visual, like
right.
even just the power of compounding and how like if you put money in and then what it's going to be worth later, like maybe that helps to
Right.
motivate.
Yeah.
Just different things.
Yeah. Different things like shock their mind and engage them in
Exactly.
different ways. Compounding is definitely they call it the eighth wonder of the world, right?
Yes,
Compounding interest.
for sure.
And yeah, so the biggest challenge I see for my kids is just as soon as, we'll give my daughter Apple Cash to go to the mall with her
Yes,
friends, and
it's
there's
gone.
no question, not one penny is coming back,
Oh,
right? And
totally.
that's part of the learning process. So if you have these open-ended, no limit, here's my credit card with a $20,000 limit on it,
Right.
you run the chance that the kids just don't understand that there are limits, and that can be a challenge,
Correct.
both because, as parents, we're the ones that pay that credit card bill, but also just
100%.
in that also being another learning experience for kids to go on their own when they're, old enough to be able to do that, and to learn that, you can't just spend every penny you have, and my daughter comes back and she has spent every penny that was in those accounts, and then we mention it, say, okay,
Right.
that
Right.
means that now you don't have money to, you're going with your friends to this thing in a couple days, you won't have as much money to spend on that because you went through every penny now. So
Definitely.
again, it's just those
I I
conversations and
agree.
getting them to think about spending as opposed to just indiscriminately spending, which is natural, I think comes naturally to kids in
Well,
general.
my son actually came back. So I also do the Apple Cash just
Mhm.
because like I was trying to do cash. It's like impossible. First off, some places
Yeah,
don't even take cash. Second of all, I really don't have cash at the time. Sometimes I forget
right.
I'm not there. But I do like the weekly Apple Cash. And my son said to me actually last week, he's like, "Oh, mom, do you know that if you don't have enough money, you could actually like borrow it from Apple or like go into debt?" I'm like, like, let's talk about that for a minute.
Let's
I was like,
talk
do you know,
about
oh,
that.
what's the interest rate on that? How much do
Right.
you have to pay them to borrow the money? He's like, I don't think anything. I'm like, well, you don't think anything or you don't know anything? I
Let's
don't,
talk
first off, I
basic
don't even know
economics.
if you can actually do that. It's a little bit like suspect, but, and I had, that was a little bit like his friend had borrowed money from Apple Cash. I was like, I'm gonna have to look into that one. This is what I mean. Still learning.
Yeah. 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 Well, the world is constantly adapting with new products, and a lot of them are geared toward kids,
Right.
and like taking advantage of the fact that they don't know any better, that, like they may be overdrawing an account or something like that. And they give them the ability to do that, but then obviously there's repayment
Right.
required. So yeah,
Correct.
and that's, I work in the world of debt, right? I do
Uh huh.
mortgages for a living. So and I've had conversations with my daughter about leverage and how it can be dangerous if you don't do it correctly, and going into debt, but going into good debt, for real
Correct.
estate or things that will, yes, you may be paying $3,000 a month for a mortgage, but your tenant is paying you 5,000. So is that good
Or
debt?
your portfolio is making 6,000,
Right.
whatever it is, right? Then
Exactly.
you wanna
Whatever
look
it
at, like,
is.
what's the differential?
Right, exactly. So it's just a matter of having those conversations. But and I appreciate all the insight you have and sharing your personal stories. And that's really, I think, what people learn most from. But I want to shift the conversation to a little bit more practical things about how do we set up our kids for financial success. Not just, we've talked now about how to educate them on these things, but maybe talk about some things that people can specifically do with their kids to put them in a position where, as young adults, whatever that means to each person individually, maybe it means when they go to college or when they graduate high school, or maybe younger, who knows, but just
Hmm.
to be put in a better position so they're not starting completely from scratch. So you talked about compounding.
Hmm.
So maybe you can talk about like what is the power of starting your kids on investing earlier. Let's say they have money from birthdays that they've saved and all these things that we tried to teach them when they were younger. Let's say they actually listened to some of it, right? And they set aside a little bit of money. Maybe you can talk about, I mean, obviously not specific investment strategies, but just the power of compounding and starting that investment journey early.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bunch of charts that I could share. I wish I could share them now, but you can. I think like just showing them that it's some different examples that if you invest money when you're when you're younger, and you can show them and you grow it at an average rate of, let's just say, 8%, how it grows over time. Because you don't just, if you earn, $100, let's say you start with $100 and you earn 8%, so now you're at $108. I'm sorry, yeah, $108. But then the next year, instead of just earning that $8, you're now earning that 8%. Not that it works so streamlined like this, but just conceptually, you now are not just earning the 108 plus 8, you're earning 108 with an 8% off of that, which is $8.64. And then that keeps moving up and moving up and moving up. So really, like, you can compound that money so much quicker. And I think showing, there's a bunch of charts that show if you save money when you're younger, like even in your 20s, versus if you save it in your 40s, how much dramatically more dramatic that grows, opposed to starting to save later at life, because of that 8%, that, as an example, and you could use any number when when you're illustrating it, but how that grows off of the growth, not just off of the original investment.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so I
it's
think that, and I think like also showing kids, and look, again, this instant gratification. You could put money in a year and then the market goes down, so they might be like, "Oh, I'm never investing again." But I think like if you can show them over time how it goes up, and even if something does go down before it goes up, that's okay. It's also a good lesson for them to know as well. And then same, being diversified, right? Like, you don't, if you pick one thing, maybe you pick the wrong thing. But if you have stuff in a lot of different areas and not all your eggs in one basket, well, now you have a better probability of success. Like having those kind of conversations. So, like, your daughter just had a bat mitzvah, mazel tov. Like, that's a great example to get her, as she seems like she's doing, um, actually investing the money. And I think like that's really where you can help, like from a young age. If your child has, like, again, like a birthday or a big event, a sweet 16, a Chris, whatever, anything, I think it's great to be able to actually get them involved and actually show them like what they received, and have let them help to allocate that money, and get them involved with, like, okay, let's look at our statements. Maybe it's like quarterly, right? Like, let's see, like, how are we doing, like what did this grow to, or did it go down, why? Like, and some kids are going to love it and be super
Mhm.
interested, and some kids are, like you said, might just glaze over, and you're like, and like, do we have to do this again, dad?
Right.
But it's still worth like getting them exposed. Other things you can do, I mean, yeah, so that's it. There's like a lot of, I think, just getting them simply invested,
Yeah.
educating them, and then um, starting the bank accounts, and then
Yep.
other,
Portfolio accounts and things like that.
mhm,
Yeah. I'm right in the middle of that with my advisor who's going to help me. It's not a huge sum of money, obviously, but it's to her it's a lot of money. So,
mhm,
and once we get the money transferred into an investment account, the plan is for all of us to sit down together and to
right,
and have my daughter be involved in that conversation. Okay, what do we put the money into? Do we just
right,
trust the advisor, which is fine if that's what we choose to do, or do we make our own decisions? How do we assess risk? Like, and as they get older, obviously these conversations are much more appropriate than when they're little. Can't have
Of
that
course, but it's
conversation with
okay
the
to, like,
5-year-old.
do it on an age appropriate level, and, like,
Yeah.
when your child earns money for the first time, like, then you can talk to them about, and obviously it sounds like forever that people would rather probably use the money to go to buy something or do something now versus save for retirement, but you can encourage, like, your child that's starting to have a paycheck, to actually set up an IRA or a Roth IRA and
Mhm.
start to actually, like, that then you show them that compounding chart and you get them to invest that even more. Like, I think that that's, doing things like that is really helpful and I want it being really
Yeah.
valuable to them.
Yeah. And the compounding also is prevalent also when you're talking about kids with 529 college savings plans. Because that's the idea, right? For the ones that my
Mhm.
wife and I started for our kids, we started when they were basically when they were born because of the benefits of compounding. And obviously we're not asking our kids to contribute to their own 529s, but just the idea of trying to help your kids, there's things that we can do as parents to put money toward things so that, for
Yes.
example, they don't have to go into massive debt
Like the
for student
529
loans.
plan.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Right. Right.
Because we
And
see, oh yeah, sorry,
no,
we
go ahead.
we see so many clients who come to us for mortgages and they're just loaded with student loan debt. And some of it
Mhm.
justified, they've got a certain type of education that will put them in a position to have a really well-paying job, and it makes sense, but it does kind of strap them for a period of time, until they get closer to paying them off. Um, but as parents, what can we do to help them? We can start early, when they're
Correct.
little, when college is such a far out idea because it's so many years out. But the benefits of compounding can really, really be beneficial.
Right, and to your point, like, I mean, wouldn't do it for our kids now, but, like, at some point, helping them establish good debt with the credit card and making sure that they pay it off, like, maybe when they're in college, things like that with a limit so that they establish that good debt. Another thing with the 529 plans that's new is that if you have a 529 plan that you didn't fully use, or even if you just don't anticipate needing all those funds, um, you can actually, if you've held it for 15 years, roll that into a Roth IRA. There's a $35,000 limit, but that's a great way to get your kid. I mean, think about the power of that gift.
Yeah,
So if you end up not needing funds, I mean, that's a great way to start establish a retirement account that, I mean, should grow exponentially by the time, they need it for retirement. So just like
right.
I think anything, I mean, and obviously it's going to depend family to family on what their means are and what they're able to do, but there's certainly a lot of planning tools that you can do, for your children.
Yeah. And I think one of the like I remember as a kid, I was a very entrepreneurial spirit,
Hmm.
right? And
I
didn't
love
have a
it.
lot of things handed to me on a silver platter, even though my family was great and they provided me everything I needed. But I was
Right.
just entrepreneurial. Like when we had a challenge at school to go sell chocolate bars, I went bananas selling chocolate bars
Right. Right. I
and
hear
winning
you,
a trophy or a medal that probably cost 50 cents.
but it meant a
But it
lot.
was a sense of pride. But I think, and I also I took jobs at a young age, not because
Hmm.
my parents forced me to, but I think more because
You
of the
wanted to.
experience. Yeah, I
Hmm.
wanted to earn money and I wanted to be able to do the
Same.
things that I wanted to do, and I saw the reward of the
Of
hard work, and
course.
it was almost like you know,
Yes, but if you have a parent that just, and I had the same thing, like I was Girl Scout, I sold the cookies, then I got jobs, I babysat, I was a camp counselor, I worked at the bagel store, like I did all that stuff. But if you think about it, like from a personal standpoint, and me too, I grew up with um, parents that helped and that did everything, for me. I'm very fortunate. However, it's like if you just give your kids everything, then they might not be as motivated to do that. And then you have to ask yourself, well, like, what am I creating here?
right.
Like there's going to be a little bit of that innately in you, of course. But, you have to either be driven or not. But like you also just want to make sure that there's some things to work for, right? Like instead of just, oh, you went to the mall, you spent all your money. Okay, no problem. Here you go. Here's another. I'll just reload your
Right.
account. Like you want to be like, oh man, like this is great, but I also want to supplement this. I can go babysitter. I can go whatever you want, snow, like plow snow. I guess you don't do that in California, but we got a bunch
Not
yesterday.
so much.
Whatever it is, right? But you can be creative or entrepreneurial and actually be creative and think, and you can be self-motivated, which I think is awesome.
Yeah. And most people may not know this about me, but when I was in college, I actually owned a house painting company. And I didn't know what I was doing, but it forced me to figure out how to do payroll and taxes and keep records. And I mean, I learned so much from that, and I probably
100%.
did 99% of it wrong. Um, but I learned very quickly how to operate a business and just the different facets of it. And then eventually I went to business school and learned the right way to do things to a degree. But it was just owning that painting company instead of working for somebody else at whatever, $5, $10 an hour, whatever it would have paid at that point. I was like, no, you know what, I had that entrepreneurial spirit and wanted to go and like go within my community or network of people that, my parents' friends who were suckers enough to let me paint their house. But I learned so much, and eventually had 10 employees who were also college students, looking to make a few bucks over the summer. But it was like such an amazing experience. And obviously you got to be a little older to do that, but I had to register with the state. I had to get insurance, like
It's
all these
amazing.
things that, like, if you don't have those experiences, you just don't,
100%.
you don't
But
learn.
like, you know what? Even like depending on the age of the kid, like when was the first time you did a lemonade stand? But you have to actually think like, okay, how much does it cost to make the lemonade? Like it's okay, it's okay if you decide you want to let your kids keep the 100% of the profits and you want to donate the expenses, like if you want to donate the lemonade or the powder and the
Mhm.
containers and the solo cups or
And
whatever it is
20
that you're
pounds of
doing.
sugar.
Exactly, or
Yeah,
the lemons, like, depends how much you wanna get in there, but
right.
it's still okay to take a step back and, like, kinda talk through. I mean, you can talk through, like, "Okay, let's see, I we spent 20, we spent end up spending, like, $30, like, you raised $50, like, again, either I'm gonna donate that $30 to the business or, like, we really, really made a profit of $20." Like,
Right.
that's actually useful information for a kid to know.
It
My
is.
son did a business, like a plastics business, but it was my daughter's 3D printer that he was using with all of her stuff. So I was like, Lexi, I mean, you're supplying him
Charge
over here,
him.
like he's getting all the profits and using your machine, and now you don't
Right.
have any more of this whatever lanyard stuff that goes in it.
That's a
So
great example. I mean, that's a perfect like teaching moment, to, yes, be
right,
generous with your brother because that's important, but also like, hey, capitalize on this. Like when you see an opportunity, take advantage
right.
of it from a business perspective, not in a bad way, taking advantage,
No,
but
no, 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 no,
yeah.
no, no. Well, it's just being aware, right? I mean, it's having those conversations and yeah, but I think to your point, that's awesome that you had that experience as an entrepreneur at such a young age. It does teach you. Like you learn so much when you're actually thrown into a situation versus your parent telling you. And maybe like when we're on the other side of this, we may listen or we may just kind of like tune out.
Yeah. Then we'll
Depending
be
on
the
the kid.
grandparents who are spoiling the kids, and and
Exactly.
our kids will be like, "Stop doing that." Really
Exactly,
teach them a
exactly.
lesson. And listen to that podcast that you
Exactly.
did once, and and now you're doing all the things wrong, all the things you said not to do. But yeah, and I know, also one of the aspects of this that a good friend of mine is sells life insurance, and
Mhm.
he is a big proponent of starting life insurance policies early because
Well, 'cause he sells it. I'm kidding.
yes, right,
I'm just
exactly.
kidding.
But he does put
I'm
his
just
money
kidding.
where his mouth
It's a
is.
joke. No, no,
But
no, I'm joking.
the insurance policies are inexpensive when you're
Right.
young,
Of course.
and they can grow over longer periods of time. So that's, in his opinion, a good investment vehicle. It might not be right for everyone.
Well, it
Um,
depends for that, you'd have to look at because I mean, I'm insurance licensed also, but, like, what we would do is look at what you have to look at, like, the different return assumptions, which will obviously be based off of how much you live, and then you see if it's a return that you are happy with or not, right?
right,
But it's
exactly.
true, you can buy insurance for a lot cheaper when you're a healthy, younger individual,
Right.
for sure.
And the idea is the same concept, compounding over time. The
Yeah.
life policies carry these cash values that can grow with time, and as you pay the premiums, you increase the cash value. may not be the right investment for everybody. Obviously, I do real estate for a living, so I like
Right.
real estate, like to invest in things that you know and understand, and that can be an Achilles heel or a really good thing, depends on how it goes. But
Right.
life
Right.
insurance is another one. I think estate planning is also important as far as what we can
Of
do for our
course.
kids to make sure that we've got that estate plan. We're really big proponents for our clients of making sure that they are well-rounded financially, and we actually, after closing, we have a gift that we send them that helps them understand what members they need on their financial team. Because surprising number of people have no professional advice at all, and they
Hmm.
really just kind of wing it. And that's usually when it's not that you necessarily end up in a bad place, but you don't end up in a place that you could be in if you're not getting
Right.
proper advice. It's a little bit more short-sighted, I would say. So that's a really important thing. And and just like, maybe you can talk about the estate planning side and what you can do for your kids to just make sure that they primarily don't lose money to taxes, right? That's the
No, of
unnecessary, that's one of the
course.
goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of we have an advanced planning team at UBS that we bring in for clients um, that are basically estate attorneys, and will kind of be a second set of eyes. We end up hiring outside attorneys to to actually do the plans, but it's a good way to have like a look and have a brainstorming session. And we definitely get involved with our clients' estate plans. And as you said, insurance could be a part of it, depending. Um, but or especially for younger families, definitely is.
Yeah.
So I think that yeah, you want to make sure first off, I think one thing that's the hardest thing to talk about, I say from clients, and I mean for all of us is like who's your guardian going to be, and that's the most important thing to figure out. And then aside from that, it's like who's going to be like, you don't want to give money out right to little kids, right? You want to have a trustee. So like who could be the trustee? You definitely want like checks and balances. You don't want the guardian necessarily having all the money to the, to the estate. But it's it's these kind of conversations that are always challenging but very, very important. And then making sure the beneficiaries are updated on your retirement account. Does it make sense to establish trusts, either in death or while people are alive? How much insurance do you have? If so, like, do we consider doing a life insurance, an ILET trust, that we remove the insurance from your estate?
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of things that go into that, and of course it's very personal from client to client, but a very, very, very big part of a client's financial plan for sure.
Yeah, and there are ways you can legally also, and without taxation, transfer money to your kids over
Yes.
time. So like
Yes,
gifting, there's
gifts.
certain caps
Mhm.
that you can gift
100%.
every year to your kids. Maybe they don't even know the account's there. That's probably
100%.
better, because
No,
otherwise
100.
it's just a
Yeah.
form and it's gone. Um,
100%.
yeah.
You can
So
gift, yeah, there's a lifetime gift exclusion, and then you also have the annual amount that you can gift. So you can gift to a 529 plan, or just to um, you can gift to different trust accounts like an UTMA or a
right.
UGMA or trusts. There's various ways that you can gift your kids, but it definitely um, makes sense, and especially talk to grandparents if they have money that they want to gift right out of their estates, because they want to remove money from their estate so they don't have to pay taxes, as much taxes on if something were to happen. And it's great to do that multi-generational also.
Yeah, and the key here is having a professional who understands how to do all these things within the confines of the tax regulations, and income, just making sure that you do it right,
100%.
because
Well,
you
what
can't
about
just
you?
transfer money to people. Yeah,
100%. And even for you, it's like as your entrepreneur, if you were to have these big liquidity events, doing the proper planning is imperative to be able to shelter money, and of course the right way from taxation. Because if you have a big liquidity event, if you do the right planning, it can be very, very impactful.
yeah, for sure. And you mentioned entrepreneurs, so I have a friend who owns a small business,
Hmm.
and it's a clothing company, and they basically pay their child something like $12,000 a year to do modeling. They take pictures of them in the clothes and stuff
Oh,
like that.
really?
And yeah, and totally legally they're
Yeah.
employed. Obviously, they're not, it has to be legitimate. You can't just pay your kids because they're your kids.
Hmm.
But there are ways
But
to
they're the
pay them
model
to
for the
their job.
business. That's what you're
Exactly.
saying, right? Hmm.
Exactly. So it allows them to pay them maybe $12,000 a year, whatever the limit is before you have to actually file a tax return for a
Right.
3-year-old child, which would be kind of funny. But they do it in a way that helps them transfer money, and they might make them part of like a long-term. I don't know if you can do this, but I'm just saying maybe they put money towards
Right.
retirement for them, a portion of their
Right.
paycheck, and it just again just like sets them up for success. And not everyone's a business owner. That doesn't apply to everyone, but there are things that you can do to legally transfer money to your children if it's done legitimately, and to avoid unnecessary taxation. Everybody pays taxes eventually, but the people who know the rules or work with advisors who know the rules are able to navigate so that they don't pay more than they technically should according to the tax code. So I think we've covered a ton. So Rachel, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I know our network will really appreciate your insight, and both as a mom, first and foremost, and also as an advisor. And I really hope that people have taken something away from this, and a nugget or two of something that inspires them to help their kids with. Was our goal for today, and hopefully we accomplished it. I know I always learn as much from these sessions as people who are attending, even though I'm on screen. So I definitely learned some new things, and I just wanted to thank you so much for joining us today.
Me too. Thank you. I really appreciate being on.
Of course. So thanks again for joining the On the Mark Financial Forum and podcast. Our next episode will be February 28th. We'll be talking about the emotional side of money, which is another important topic to cover. So thanks again, Rachel. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.